living an intentional life at work?
Was it work? Yes, it was. I think it was. Let me get my screen share running again. Oh, I can't share that yet. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, one more moment.
Jerry and Teresa's looking good.
Thanks, Dick.
You weren't supposed to hear that.
Again, another reminder that we can hear everything on your microphone.
Amen.
Thanks, Kevin. All right. I think I've got everything reset. Hopefully we don't have another hiccup. If we do, well, technology has decided that today is not my day. So last week, yeah, we talked about being intentional at work. Your hard work is reflective of your character. And faith, be present, provide value. Don't forget the lesson of the yellow M&M. Work is important, but it's not the most important. As Kevin has mentioned in chat and in voice, if you could please mute your phones unless you're looking to participate. That'll really help us out in terms of making sure we get the class running the way that we want and we have the right audio flowing. So this week, this class is going to look a little bit more like the more traditional classes that I typically run. So we'll see how that goes. Just a quick kind of pull out to get started. What do you guys think, if you had to rank some attributes that God desires in us, what kinds of things do you think are at the top of the list? What's God's wish list for our attributes?
Faithfulness.
Faithfulness, yep. What else?
Humility.
Say again, Beth, I missed it.
Humility, being humble enough.
Humility, yeah, absolutely.
Love.
Love, yep. Great.
Model ourselves after Christ.
Model ourselves after Christ. Yep.
Obedience.
Obedience. Yep.
Mercy.
Mercy. Very good.
I think he also, as he has said, suffer the little children to come unto me. He wants us to be in that, innocence, looking for beauty in everything. The children are trusting. So I think we need to keep that in mind as well.
Okay. Very good. Absolutely. Anything else that kind of jumps? You know, we could make a very long list, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. But I kind of wanted to start with this because I think there's a trap, and a little bit of a trap, not a big trap. I kind of was in this same, you know, I come up with the same kind of list, and there's a few things, you know, I put the fruit of the Spirit in there, right? There are other things that I think would wind up in the list, and I missed something that kind of struck me, and so we'll come back to it. But first, how are you doing? And we get this question a lot, right? How's your quarantine? How are you enjoying quarantine, right? And then certainly the world has changed a lot the last 2 months. But what's your answer? You know, what's your answer look like when somebody asks you, how's your quarantine going?
I miss my friends.
Miss my friends, yeah. Yep. What else? Anybody have some? I usually wind up in the homeschooling track because I see how much pain that causes Aaron, and we have to, you know, there's a lot of awful hard work to try and get that done. But it's tough, right?
It's putting a lot of extra work on just a few people.
Yeah. And you know, how many times have we asked each other this, right? How many times have we asked each other this, right? And what's that default reply?
Every time we talk to somebody, and it's always, well, we're hanging in there.
Right? Yep. Very much. Yep. I had I bought something online, and I was on a live chat with somebody to help me with the purchase, and it was taking an extra amount of time, which wasn't a huge deal, but this individual was just trying to keep chit chat going. Right? I've never met them, never meet them again, and the how are you doing with quarantine came along, right? My answer was something like, well, you know, we're surviving, but you know, it was kind of a grumpy, yeah, it's fine. Well, not great, but we'll get over it, right?
Having to do this pesky online chat to make a purchase.
Yeah,
Go to the store and pick it up.
that's right. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you know, this is pretty pathetic, right? Why in the world am I complaining? What's there to complain about? I have to spend more time with my kids. Okay. All right. So
Because it's a major change that's been forced upon us. It wasn't anything any of us chose to do.
right. But what should our reply look like? What do you think God would have our reply be? How's your quarantine going? What do you think?
This is the positive aspect.
It is well is what it should be what is it is well with our soul.
Because we're actually alive and have a home to be staying in.
Yeah. Yeah.
We should be content in whatever situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And you know, instead we wind up in this kind of, or I say we, like the royal we, this one right here, wind up in this little bit of a grumble, right? About where things are at or how things are going. And so today we're going to talk about gratitude and how it fits, right? So what is gratitude?
Being thankful for what you have.
Being grateful for what you have. Yep. What else? What else?
Appreciation.
Appreciation. Yeah. What else?
Also being content with what you have.
Content. Yeah.
Not taking things for granted.
Yep.
In general, it's a positive outlook on things.
It's a positive outlook on things. Is that do you think that's the cause or the effect?
Cause or effect of what?
The being grateful. The thing that popped in my head when you said that was that you know, maybe, do you have the positive attitude first and then you're grateful about things, or do you think you're grateful about things and then have a positive attitude?
Oh, I see. I guess it depends on who you are, because for some people it's one way, for other people it's the other. Sometimes some people just naturally, I don't know, naturally is the right word, but inherently have a positive outlook on things, and so they have this continuing appreciation or gratitude for everything in their life. For other people, it's kind of forced upon them because good things happen to them that they didn't expect, and so they are somehow triggered to realize, oh, I'm glad that's happened, and it generates a more positive outlook for them from an external stimulus.
Yeah.
I think gratitude can be learned.
Yeah.
I think it's a mental mindset that through the course of time, of course, it's not a switch you flip, but I think you can learn to be grateful in heart and mind. It is a choice of how you choose to see anything, positive or negative.
Yeah, I think so. So I want to pull Webster, right? And Webster does us the great wonder of defining the thing with the word in it, right? The state of being grateful and thankfulness. Okay, well, great. We move over to grateful. Appreciative of benefits received. Expressing gratitude. So thank you for the circle. Appreciate that. Affording pleasure or contentment, or pleasing. Pleasing by reason of comfort supplied or discomfort alleviated. This second definition is a little bit strange to me, right? I always think about this in terms of this first kind of definition, right? And I kind of struggle to as much to put the second piece down, right? Because and the reason is because I think, you know, when we're grateful in the way that God wants us to be grateful, the second part of that definition isn't necessary. Right? Because I think we get this in our heads where, and that's why, you know, I'm not trying to pick on you, Ray, but that's kind of why I was poking a little bit, is that there's this idea that gratefulness and happiness or gratefulness and pleasure go together, right? And I think they tend to push that direction. If you're grateful, you tend to be to have a happier state of mind, if you will. But I don't think it's required, right? And we're going to get into a bunch of verses in a little bit, and I probably didn't get as many verses in today as I'd want to. But I want to keep that kind of dichotomy in our heads, because I think we're called to be grateful, even when we're not happy about it. And that's a difficult adventure, and we'll get there. Okay. All right, back to the show. How do you see gratitude, and how do you know it's there? How do you see gratitude? What does it look like?
A smile.
A smile. Okay. What else?
I guess if you don't complain a lot, then that might be kind of one way to show gratitude.
Yeah, what's it not? Complaining. Yeah, absolutely. What else? What is it like? How do you see it? How do you feel it?
How about a kind word?
Kind word, yeah. Acknowledgement kind of comes to mind, right? There's that specific acknowledgement of, you know, Dick, I really appreciate you speaking up in class. That really helped, right? It's a direct piece, right?
Right.
Absolutely. What else?
Sometimes, John, it ought to be expected, but then it's even better when it's unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah, our ladies do a wonderful job of that, getting notes in the mail from the Wednesday ladies class is always a highlight, right? And you know, for a birthday or for a whatever, it's appreciated. Do you think we're in a increasing or decreasing gratitude environment in the world?
Decreasing.
Yeah. It's sad. It's kind of
It depends on where you look.
Oh yeah? How
Yeah.
so?
Well, I think if you look at our national political scene, it's decreasing.
Who?
But if you look at local events, I see the news reports of all of the ways teachers and school administrators are supporting the students, particularly the seniors who would be graduating this year, or the appreciation and gratitude being shown toward medical providers and those related to that field. That happens more on a local level, but if you just focus only on the national stuff, it seems like it's going downhill.
So
I've seen gratitude when you're going shopping during the senior hours. Never heard so many people being happy that they're over 60 and retired.
Good one, Warner.
So, it went away. It was a good thought. It's all gone. So we've talked about gratitude. It came back. It's still in the room. So we talked about gratitude as being, predominantly a thing that is said, right? But is that all that it is? Is it a nice word?
John, I think the word gratitude comes from the word grace, because I know I looked up, I grabbed a dictionary and looked up gratitude, and it comes from the Latin of gratis, which I guess is grace. So it's kind of like, how, I don't know, this is just me talking, but it's kind of like how we should feel for any unmerited favor we get from God, because, anything I think the good that is good that happens in our life, or ways that we don't have to, experience as much anxiety or anguish as other people is essentially a part of the grace that we get from God.
I love that. And we're going to bounce back into that in a little bit. So that's great. You're 2 slides ahead. So why gratitude? Why are we called to have gratitude? What does it do?
It's the antidote to being ungrateful.
Well. All right, what else? But what does it do to us?
Teaches us.
Teaches us what?
So I wrote a quick note so I wouldn't forget it, because, thoughts kind of disappear pretty quick. Gratitude is the unintentional consequence of learning, I think. And we don't always see it until we actually have to think about it. So by learning, it's just a consequence of learning. It's an intentional, I guess. But if we're learning something about someone, or we're learning something about ourselves, we become grateful. People maybe in third world countries see this a lot easier because they are learning things from other people very quickly. So if you go over and you do a mission work or something, they see it and they're grateful. Here, we're not as grateful because we think we know everything.
I think we're not as grateful also because we tend to take things for granted.
Yeah, there's 2 sides of that, of the 2 men who went up to pray. And the first guy, who happened to be the Pharisee, he says, I am thankful that I am not like other men. And the other man had to live with people bad talking him, because he was a tax collector. He was a publican, and he found another way of being thankful to God that the other man was not. And thankfulness, something that can be like a serendipity. It's something that you weren't expecting to encounter, but when it does, it brings an immeasurable amount of joy to your heart because it's not going to you alone, it's going back up to God or back out to others.
Awesome. Let's keep rolling. I think I'm going to go through a couple verses here, and I want you to be looking at the gratitude that is, or how gratitude is reflected in these verses, and we're going to talk about them. I think we'll probably do it one chunk at a time. So if you want to open your Bibles, Romans chapter 1, I've got a large chunk of context here on the screen. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Tell me about gratitude within this verse in Romans. What do we learn from this piece?
Maybe some humbleness.
How so?
Claiming to be wise and they became fools. Bless you.
Thank you. Got the mute button fast enough. Yeah, so
I mean, I guess to be grateful means that you're admitting that you couldn't have done something yourself.
You can also be gracious or be thankful that the truth about God can be known to you, to all people. You don't necessarily have to come someone and teach you. It's self-evident in nature.
I'm finding it interesting that we're using grateful and thankful interchangeably.
Yeah, the dictionary did that a little bit, right? Gratitude is being thankful, according to that first definition we popped up. Thankfulness and gratitude go together from a dictionary perspective.
And it's also related to grace, because the same word is like when we're saying grace, we're giving thanks, because it's the same word, it's the same root word in Greek.
Right. So I think there's a couple things to peel out within this verse, and I'm pointing at my screen like you can see it. So let me do something a little bit better than that. Right. For although they knew God, right? So these are folks that knew God that Paul is talking to here. They did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. So they failed in two things, right? They didn't honor him as God or give thanks to him. And the reason I kind of highlighted this is because to me, this is indicating that this gratefulness or gratitude, thankfulness, grace is a much bigger bucket than I think I would have put it in, right? If I go back to that first slide, right? What's your list of attributes that God's looking for? Gratitude towards God was really stinking high on the list in this regard. And the result of that, right? The result was they became futile in their thinking. And Don and I had not gone down the learning track, but futile in your thinking is you ain't learning nothing, At least that's how I'm kind of reading that, right? And
Empty in their thinking.
Their foolish hearts were darkened. Go ahead, Gordon.
Being empty in their thinking.
Yeah, claiming to be wise, but really being foolish. Right? They became fools and exchanged the glory of God for images resembling mortal man, birds, animals, and creeping things.
I think it's being self-reliant and forgetting about who's in charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's more than just being thankful. I think it's also recognizing where everything comes from.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. 1 Thessalonians 5. We ask you, brothers, to respect those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves, and we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. See that no one repays anyone evil for evil, but always seek to do good to one another and to everyone. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Do not quench the spirit, do not despise prophecies, but test everything. Hold fast what is good, abstain from every form of evil. What's our instruction here about gratitude?
In everything, give thanks. Everything. That's good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right. So we coupled a little bit earlier, right? This concept of maybe being grateful with things going well or being happy, right? And I don't know that those, what we didn't say those things at the same time, right? But we're asked for more. Be grateful in all circumstances, whether whatever is happening is a good thing or a bad thing or a coronavirus thing or a whatever thing, right?
I think we're guilty of taking things for granted and not being thankful when we have everything good going for us.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to pick that apart a little bit. This isn't exactly what you said, but I think you're really on track. When everything's going great for us, we still have trouble with gratitude. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. And
I'm actually on Facebook. I'm part of a group called Forgotten Ireland, and every once in a while there'll be a story of how hard the Irish had it, but looking back they realized they had it better, because even though it was difficult, life was difficult, they learned more, they got along more, they worked harder, and everybody supported each other. And I can kind of see that, with our boys being at his sister's, if they were here, there wouldn't be anything here for them to do. They'd be playing video games, and they might prefer that, but they're on the farm working hard and learning all kinds of skills. And, so when it says, give thanks in all circumstances, it might be harder for them, working on the farm, but their circumstances are so much better for them right now, because they're growing from it.
You'll have to fill us in later on how you convinced relatives to take homeschooling. That's a skill that I admire. That. Outstanding.
I think your verse 18 there, John, taps into Philippians 4:12 and 13. Paul said that he had discovered the secret of how to be thankful, of how to appreciate the worst of situations along with the best of situations.
Right. So I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound in any and every circumstance. I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Yeah, it does. And it ties into our next, where we're going next, if the slides will advance for me. Click, click. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. So we talked a little bit about this, right? You know, so I'm not going to belabor this. I'm going to make up a tiny little bit of time here. But you know, we're not called to walk through this life alone. We're called to have gratitude, but then rely on one another. How do you do that when you're struggling or you need help? Right? And this kind of struck me as I was looking through this, because, you know, our default, or let me be very specific. My default when I need help is to complain about something. Sorry. But I think that's missing it. So how do we reach out for help with maintaining this spirit of gratitude?
I think it's maybe a little bit of a mindset. And to help you get into that mindset, if you start off with a prayer, that might help.
Yeah, absolutely. What else?
I think it's important that we realize we can learn something even through the most difficult circumstances. To be grateful even though the circumstances are not what we would prefer, but it doesn't mean we can't learn and be grateful that, first of all, that we had the wisdom to see that we did get to learn something. Or, I don't know, I think we can just learn that God is going to be with us. He's promised that. And I think this gratitude is more a case of heart and putting us in relationship with him. Whether it's a good situation or a bad situation, and whether we learn something immediately or realize that we learned something 10 years later. It goes to the heart and the relationship with God, to me.
I know when I'm struggling with something, I find that I'm grateful just to know that I have brothers and sisters out there in Christ that I can reach out to help me.
That's a good thought. Thanks, Teresa.
I think the thing that occurred to me when I was kind of bouncing through this was to put the whining aside, right? To be direct. Kevin, I need your help. I'm struggling with this, that, or the other. Can you help me? Right? Rather than, Kevin, I just can't take another day of homeschooling. Right? You know, we don't need to go through the lack of gratitude, right, or the complaining or the whining in order to get to a request for help. And a little bit of directness there, because you're right, Teresa. We've got a family here that's here to help.
I think one obstacle is our pride, that we don't want to ask for help. We want to think that we can do it ourselves. We don't want anybody to think, to know that we need help.
And that goes right back to what Don was saying about being willing to learn something. Absolutely.
I don't know that I can help you with homeschooling, though.
I was going to say that, Kevin. I don't think you're the guy to call. But yes, it's the learning. But I think it also goes back to the comfortable and uncomfortable position we put ourselves in. And if we're uncomfortable, it's very easy to complain. the learning comes from being comfortable. And once we're comfortable and we've learned it, then all of a sudden we're like, wow, I made it through the quarantine. I didn't think I could do it, but I could. Through which strength? Okay, so did God help me through it? Yes. Did my friends help me through it? Yes. Am I more comfortable talking to people about my needs and about what I have to do to make it through this hard time? Does that make sense on the learning part of it?
Yeah. No,
It's more of going from an uncomfortable state to a comfortable state.
No, I like that. I appreciate that.
That's kind of what was going through my mind too, was it's more of a timing thing, because it's rare when I'm going through a rough patch that I think of how thankful or grateful I am that I'm going through this rough patch. It's not until after it's over that I have time to sit back, reflect, assess, analyze what happened and how I was able to deal with it, that I can then develop that higher plane of gratitude or thankfulness.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
John?
Oh boy. Yep.
I'm thinking of Joseph at the end of Genesis, how his family came in because of the famine. Joseph had a lot of time on his hands to be bitter, but I think at the end of the day, he chose to be thankful. He told his family how much he loved them and missed them, and how that God had sent him ahead, not just to save the family, but to save 2 nations.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's this verse, right? I think we all find from time to time challenging. James 1 and verse 2. It doesn't sound good, and it sounds quite horrible. But the question then is, why in the world would God ask us to do this? Why does God ask us to show gratitude when we meet trials of various kinds?
Well, that kind of goes back to what Beth and Don were both saying about the learning aspect of it. Every time you go through a trial, you learn something and come out of it stronger.
I think one of the best examples I know of that is from Corrie ten Boom's book about when she and her sister were in concentration camps. And they thought her sister was crazy because she gave thanks to God for everything. And especially when they were moved into a different facility that was infested with fleas. And she gave thanks to God for the fleas. And they thought she was crazy until they noticed that because of the fleas, the guards stayed out of the room and didn't bother them the way they did in other places.
Yeah.
Well, context is a wonderful thing, because he tells us, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Right? He's continuing to perfect us. A little bit later in that first chapter of James, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed with his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. And in Romans 8, likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose, right? We're asked to count it all joy when we meet trials, because it's for our own good. Ew. Ew. We're out of time. How do we become more intentional with gratitude? We're going to just get to some specific things. How do we become more intentional? How do we ensure that gratitude walks with us? What do we do?
Give thanks every morning for what we have, I guess.
Do it more. Absolutely.
Also, it's like that, the song we sing, Count Your Many Blessings. If you just stop and think about what you're blessed with, it's easier to be grateful for what you have.
The thing that I kind of took away from some of this is something that kind of popped in there is that this is really difficult, right? Especially when we wind up in conflict with each other. And it's easy to be ungrateful when we're having struggles and those kinds of things. Just to remember that the world is full of people with good intent. We've had some hiccups trying to get accomplished what we need to get accomplished this week. And it's hard. It's hard to be grateful for somebody on the other side of the phone when we can't figure out why in the world things aren't working the way we want them to. And ultimately, even folks that we're in conflict with usually are trying to do something good, right? They have some form of good intent. Usually it's for you, sometimes it's not, but it's rarely ever malicious. These are just things that were kind of stuck on my head this week. So there you have it. Open to me the gates of righteousness that I may enter through them and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord. The righteous shall enter through it. I thank you that you have answered me and have become my salvation. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Go do something about it. Thank you all for a very fun class. Next week, love. And just a few more left. Thank you all.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.